Kuki Shinobu has opened up a new meta in Genshin Impact. And no, I'm not talking about the maximum DPS that everyone chases because that's not what she does. I'm talking about the easy to build healer meta where, like Kokomi, you can have a comfort character that makes the game a lot easier with stellar healing on a full HP build. I'm also talking about the meta where Shinobu is our very first electro healer, which opens up several new team building options that we've never had in the past. In essence, that's who Kuki Shinobu actually is. She's a character that can be enjoyed by casual players because of her accessible healing, and also more serious players because of the new role that she fills. As always, this guide will cover everything you need to know about Shinobu, from her best artifacts and weapons to general playstyle and team compositions. Without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. As I said before, Shinobu is a very simple character. Her elemental skill is very similar to Chi-Chi's, where it pulses every 1.5 seconds to deal damage in a small AoE and heal your active character. Her elemental burst is simply just a larger AoE that deals electro damage based on your max HP. Outside of those basics that you probably already knew through version previews/demos, there are a few more things that you should know about Shinobu. First, and probably the most important extra about Shinobu, is that her second Ascension talent increases her healing by 75% of her elemental mastery. This is a great passive, but there is a clarification that needs to be made. The 75% increase in healing is calculated before healing bonus, meaning that it's probably not efficient to go full elemental mastery and completely ignore healing bonus on Shinobu. Instead, I think most players should try to focus both with elemental mastery in artifact substats or weapons, while we have healing bonus as the main stat in our circlet. The next thing that you need to know about Kuki Shinobu is that she gets benefits from being under 50% HP. Luckily for you, she can reliably get below 50% HP because, like Hu Tao, she also sacrifices 30% of her current HP to activate her elemental skill. The bonuses she gets while she's under 50% HP are a 15% healing bonus increase and more hits on her elemental burst. Specifically, if you are above 50% HP, your burst hits enemies for 7 ticks, while below 50% HP, that number increases to 12 ticks. And last but not least, if you like theory crafting, this wouldn't be a guide if we didn't touch upon internal cooldowns. Shinobu's elemental skill follows the standard ICD of 2 seconds. Since her elemental skill pulses every 1.5 seconds, this means that every other hit from her elemental skill will apply electro onto the enemy. Moving into artifacts, it should be no surprise that Shinobu's artifacts are really easy and really cheap to get, given that she's pretty much a pure healer. Starting off with her best in slot artifact set, it's definitely going to be the 4-set Tenacity of the Millelith. Given that her elemental skill pulses over the duration, Kuki Shinobu can have almost 100% uptime on the 20% attack buff that this set offers at C0. As a healer that doesn't offer much DPS herself, it's crucial that we take every opportunity to buff up our main DPS characters, and this set is the perfect solution to that. Beyond the 4-set Tenacity, we also have sets like the 4-set Hued Clam, which will effectively increase Shinobu's DPS. Unfortunately, you can only expect the bubble to do around 8k to 12k depending on your build, but in Superconduct teams, that number can increase upwards of 15k to 16k per bubble. Ultimately, the 4-set Hued Clam is not too bad on Shinobu, but mathematically, it's pretty much impossible to reach the maximum 30k damage in your everyday gameplay. Pure healing options like the 2-set Maiden's Beloved with the 2-set Hued Clam, or even the 4-set Maiden's Beloved, are also great for Kuki. As for artifact stats, you're going to want HP in the Sands, HP in the Goblet, and healing bonus in the Circlet. In artifact substats, this is where we focus exclusively HP and elemental mastery. You can also focus energy recharge in artifact substats if you like to use Shinobu's elemental burst often. It's not mandatory to use Shinobu's burst off cooldown in some teams since it doesn't really contribute to her healing, but if you want to consistently spam her elemental burst, I found that anywhere from 160 to 180% energy recharge is more than enough for most team compositions. Like artifacts, Kuki Shinobu's best weapons also revolve around providing benefits to your main DPS characters or bolstering her own healing/stats. For Shinobu's best in slot, we have Kazuha's signature weapon, Freedom Sworn. This weapon is perfect for Shinobu because not only does it provide elemental mastery for her healing, but the passive is also not terribly difficult to activate with Shinobu, meaning we get a pretty consistent weapon that provides benefit to both Shinobu and her teammates at the same time. Outside of Freedom Sworn, everything else is a toss-up for Shinobu's weapons. Depending on what you need, some weapons will be better in certain situations over other weapons. But as a general guideline, after Freedom Sworn, one of the most valuable weapons is Favonius Sword. The extra energy particles that you generate from the passive are not just for Shinobu. They can also be funneled into a main DPS that struggles with energy. Of course, this weapon requires you to get as much crit rate and artifact substats so that you can consistently activate the passive. In the number 3, 4, and 5 spots, we have Iron Sting, Primordial Jade Cutter, and Sacrificial Sword, respectively. Iron Sting and Primordial Jade Cutter are both pure stat sticks. Iron Sting is craftable, meaning it's a free-to-play option for Elemental Mastery. Meanwhile, Jade Cutter is the opposite, being a limited banner weapon, and it provides HP instead of EM. Sacrificial Sword is a weapon that you're probably using on Xingqiu, but if you happen to have an extra one, it's pretty good on Shinobu. C2 already gives Shinobu 100% uptime on her elemental skill, but if you lack C2, this weapon can also achieve the same thing. And just like Favonius Sword, the huge energy recharge stat and the low base attack also work out in Shinobu's favor. Beyond the options I just listed, there are a few more options like Festering Desire, Scoured Blade, the Alley Flash, and Dark Iron Sword that also work on Shinobu. Like Iron Sting, the Alley Flash and Dark Iron Sword provide EM with negligible passives. Meanwhile, Festering Desire and Scoured Blade are your other options if you need energy recharge. Last but not least, we have teams with Kuki Shinobu. This is probably the most exciting part about Shinobu because her introduction brings some changes to older team comps. Today, there are 2 teams that I want to talk about that have gotten the biggest changes right upon her release. The first team is the Eula Hypercarry team, where now Eula is not tethered to Diona. Instead of running Eula with Diona, we can now run offensive cryo supports like Rosaria and Shenhe while maintaining a core of 2 electro characters. An example team of this can look like Eula, Rosaria, Kuki Shinobu, and Beidou. Ultimately, in this team, Kuki can continuously buff and heal Eula with the 4-set Tenacity of the Millelith and provides the electro resonance to generate more particles for our second electro character. The second team I want to talk about is a Taser setup. For those who don't know, a Taser team consists of 2 electro characters, 1 hydro application, and an animo character to swirl the elements together and take advantage of the electro charge reaction. The previous issue with Taser teams is that the only source of healing would be the hydro character, since oftentimes we would want Kazuha and Sucrose as the animo character to provide huge buffs to the team. That left Kokomi and Xingqiu as the only 2 hydro healers with consistent hydro application. Luckily for us, Kuki Shinobu changes that and opens up the hydro character slot to many other hydro characters. Of course, this isn't necessarily the case if you slot in a healer of an element that's not hydro like Bennett, but if we're strictly talking about the double electro plus 1 hydro and 1 animo setup, Shinobu opens up a ton of different options. Now, a Taser team with Shinobu can use all the other hydro characters that focus on DPS without sacrificing healing. Some of these characters include Yelan, Kamisato Ayato, Child, and Mona. And of course, Kokomi and Xingqiu are still very powerful in Taser teams even if you already have Shinobu for healing. For the second electro character aside from Shinobu, again your most common options are going to be Beidou, Raiden Shogun, and Fischl. Sucrose and Kazuha should be your animo characters 100% of the time in order to buff the damage of your team beyond the 4-set Viridescent Veneerer. Of course, there are still more teams being tested with Kuki Shinobu, but those 2 teams that I just talked about have seen the most immediate impact with the introduction of her. I personally really like these comfort characters like Shinobu and Kokomi, even if they aren't the biggest DPS machines, and I know a lot of other players feel the same way. I've really been enjoying Shinobu, and if you guys are too, let me know down in the comments below your build and your thoughts on her so far. But besides that, if you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, be sure to support both the video and the channel. You can follow me on Twitch, join my Discord, sub to the YouTube channel, or whatever people do nowadays. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.